What's going on, my little pog champs? It's me, Shark, back again with another video. It seems like Ben Shapiro had some extra time on his hands, so he decided to put those little babies to work and he made a movie. Apparently he's really upset that since school's been out, he can't use school shootings to throw fuel on the fire of the conservative victim complex and make them think that Joe Biden is going to send the Gestapo to their house to club them over the head with 18-inch big black Jerome dildos and take their guns from their still warm hands. So instead of coming to grips with the fact that he's just delusional, he decided to make his own school shooting in a movie.
This is high school. Nothing that happens here matters in the real world.
So apparently what this movie is about, these kids tried to do Columbine 2 Electric Boogaloo by driving a van into her high school. First, she runs, and then she hides, but then she fights. And that's why the movie is called Run, Hide, Fight. So the Daily Wire is doing NRA propaganda now? Yes. 14% on Rotten Tomatoes and 13% on Metacritic. Disturbingly plausible plot made uncannily realistic through excellent acting. If you were wondering, yeah, that was a school locker door stopping rifle bullets. This movie honestly seems like the pinnacle of realism. I might as well be watching the cam footage from Virginia Tech right now. Wow. 0 out of 10, you don't see Ben Shapiro as the star role. Can you imagine Ben Shapiro playing as like an 18-year-old? Hello, my fellow kids. Let's say, hypothetically, we fought back.
Run, Hide, Fight stars Isabel May and Thomas Jane. It is an edge-of-your-seat thriller. It's awesome. It's R-rated, edgy, gritty, complex, exciting. It's the stuff that you want in a movie. You would watch it whether you're conservative or not conservative. And we've had amazing engagement.
It often feels like an insanely poor taste experiment. What would you do? The film is tasteless and needles its viewers throughout.
People are loving the film.
It's hard to say what's more offensive. The Rankin is pissing into an overflowing reservoir of national pain, or that he's doing it so poorly. Just kidding, it's not hard at all.
So here's the question that we've been getting a lot from left, right, and center. Why are a bunch of folks who create podcasts and internet news releasing an action-packed thrill ride of a movie? Well, the answer is because we are in the middle of a culture war. Okay, the fact of the matter is that the culture is dominated by the left, all the cultural institutions. And it's not just that Hollywood is dominated by the left, it's that their content caters almost solely to the left. They'll have a tentpole flick every so often that really brings in the big bucks, but most of their low-level content is replete with leftist messaging. And the reality, again, is that the critics help exacerbate this problem. If you check out the gap on Rotten Tomatoes between what the critics think and what the audience thinks, it's often quite wide, and usually where the movies are most political. So you need an alternative. You need a place to go where you can see entertainment that is not going to deliberately offend your values, where you can see a movie that is actually going to side with you and against a lot of left-wing tropes.
Here's the thing, right? I don't know what Ben Shapiro means by like left-wing values. Can you imagine? Like, what are left-wing values? Don't hate gay people. Sometimes you can have family that's not your blood lineage. Corporations are kind of bad. Does Ben Shapiro, would he see like Cyberpunk and every time a Johnny or something or V says corpo, he like shivers? He has a shooting pain like in his sternum. He's like, more corporate bigotry. What does offend values mean? Like, because the normal tropes in a movie, it's things like punching up, the underdog type winning, it's going against really powerful and entrenched in institutions. All of these sorts of things that conservative values don't play into, because conservative values are all about knowing your place, individualism, like not getting any help, not being a part of a community, and lots of these sorts of values that you get out of entertainment today are about the story of like friendship and the protagonist trying to do things alone, but they realize that they can't do it without other people's help, or like law movies even with like corporate like insurance companies holding out on people who are dying of like leukemia or something, stopping them from being able to afford their payments. The propaganda that you have to get from from sort of like conservative ideals is pretty bad. If you guys remember the sort of like books that Ben Shapiro used to write, Ben Shapiro did a ripoff of Mice and Men. It was like this farm, and it was one brother who was born smart and born epic and pog, and it was another brother who was born dumb and born not as cool and great. He literally wrote Chad versus Virgin, and the brother who was just genetically superior always won in everything all throughout the entire book, and the brother who was born like genetically inferior was just always bad and ruining things for the older brother, even though he tried to help, but every time he helped he just failed because he wasn't genetically pure enough. And that continued through the entire book. What's the next movie gonna be about? A benevolent corporation fighting against an evil government tyranny and regulation?
The gap has been emerging in real time between Hollywood and the rest of the United States. Hollywood made Atomic Blonde, which was an attempt to respond to James Bond by basically just making James Bond a woman. Very often the critics are just judging movies almost solely based on politics.
Is he just mad because there was a woman who punched a man and then the man fell over? I think that's unironically what he's upset about. Like a woman in a movie where like anybody just punches someone and then they do 57 backflips into a brick wall, fly out and then bounce off of like scaffolding and then fall into like a dump truck. And they're like, oh yeah, all of that's fine. But the problem was that the woman hit them. We all know that's fake.
Good example, the Jordan Peele movie Us. Now, the movie is like, okay, it's not a great movie. It's certainly not as good as Get Out, but they decided universally that it was very important for you to watch it because it had super important messages. So all the reviews said things like, well, the movie doesn't meet the high standards of Get Out. It's also a super duper important movie that you must see. Why? Well, because of the messages of Us, which is all about income inequality and racial inequality and all of Jordan Peele's usual sort of leftist messages.
Don't you think it's interesting that things like, racial inequality and income inequality aren't seen as conservative messages? I'm not sure if he knows he's doing this, and I'm not even sure if a lot of his audience were picking up on it, but basically what he's saying is that reality has a left-wing bias. When we talk about things that are actually happening in the world, like income inequality, Jeff Bezos and Bill Gates have combined more money than I think 10, 12, or 13% of the bottom United States combined. To say that there's not like massive income inequality in this country is just laughable. If they actually held true to any of their values whatsoever, they wouldn't want things like racial or income inequality, at least in the way that we're seeing it today, because this would be less meritocratic. These sorts of inequality would make it so people that have good ideas and want to be able to produce something and make a business, they'd have the ability to do these things if we didn't have such rampant inequality. Maybe instead of choosing between your rent or your medicine this month, you'd be choosing what paint job on your private jet you'd be having, if these guys actually cared. But they don't. They never have.
A lot of folks in the sports world have decided that they are no longer going to be participating in viewing sports. I'm one of those people. I'm a huge sports fan.
Every time he says this, I don't believe it's true. Every time conservatives are like, I'm a huge sport fan, but I don't do sport anymore because sport bad. I really feel like this is just very not true. Lots of these things, they just kind of go back to it. Bigger machines, those like little coffee machines that dropped Tucker Carlson, or like wearing Nike. I just really feel like this is something that you just throw a temper tantrum over and then you just don't go back to it.
Look at the numbers on ESPN since 2000. They've declined markedly. People have been cutting the cord like crazy. I watch baseball, I watch basketball, I watch football. But this season, I didn't watch a minute of any of them because they decided in the middle of the Black Lives Matter protests to simply mirror a bunch of untruths about the United States and America's systemic racism. The idea was that if you didn't really want to see equality, throwing up an alley-oop for Black Lives Matter, that somehow you were a racist. They allowed all these woke messages to take over the entire sport and corrupt the sport so that you weren't actually watching sports. You were now watching MSNBC with a little bit of basketball in between.
What's happening? They spend like 30 seconds in the beginning of the game wearing a black t-shirt and kneeling, and then he's like, this is basically watching I feel like I'm watching the Young Turks right now. If you don't want to see equality, you're racist. Yeah. What was that line? Wait, can I hear that again?
The idea was that if you didn't really want to see equality, throwing up an alley-oop for Black Lives Matter, that somehow you were a racist. They allowed.
If you don't want to see equality, then you're okay. I mean, what a hard point to argue against, honestly. Why don't them Negroes just bounce a ball? I hate it when they speak.
The Miami Herald study reveals reasons for enormous drop in sports viewership, including political dynamic. They say 70% of Republicans said they are less likely to watch live sports because of athletes' calls for racial justice.
Wait, jeez. Wait, that's a good stat that you think that you should be putting up? I'm genuinely curious. Did he think that this was a slam dunk? Fucking got him. I can't believe those people are calling for racial justice. I mean, at least I don't have to make the argument. Man, next time I'm arguing with a conservative and I say that conservatives hate racial justice, I can just pull this Ben Shapiro video up of him just saying it himself. They make our arguments for us. This is something that you would like skip over when reading a study. If you're a conservative, you don't want to admit something like this. But can you imagine, like, you standing there, right? And then the interviewer goes to you, excuse me, sir, can you please tell us why you're less likely to watch hockey? And you're like, yeah, I'm less likely to watch hockey these days because they keep saying rape is bad. There's just way too many politics in these sports nowadays. Why don't they just hit the puck with the stick?
Well, no, it's not because of athletes' calls for racial justice. It's because athletes have been kneeling for the national anthem, suggesting that America is systemically racist and that all inequalities are chalked up to inequities. Well, the reality is that the right, we can tune out, but it's not enough to tune out. We have to offer alternatives.
It's not because they're calling for racial justice. It's because they're kneeling while calling for racial justice. Why football man no stand up?
There's a reason that millions of people believe lies about conservatives. There's a reason millions of people believe lies about America. There's a reason that people look at you, if you don't like these movies, as though you're a bad person. They've been trained to do so by a culture that despises conservatives. You can see it in nearly every film. You can see it in virtually all TV. It is a blanket statement about you. Hollywood is. They won't cater to you.
Look at the victim complex on this guy, dude. They hate you. They don't want anything to do with you. They won't cater to you. They don't want you. What is this? This is like borderline abusive boyfriend type language. They don't want anything to do with you. You should just forget about them. But I'm here. I'm here for you, babe. This is the guy who just spent the last minute in this video talking about how systemic racism doesn't exist and black people aren't victims. And now conservatives are the real victims because they don't make trickle-down economic kid shows on PBS.
So here's the thing. We need alternatives. It's not enough to just disengage. It's not enough to just turn off the TV. And so here's what Daily Wire is planning. Daily Wire will, in 2021, be jumping into the world of entertainment content. We're going to start by putting our stamp on TV and movies. We're going to make edgy and entertaining films that aren't trying to brainwash you every step of the way.
I guess they just really hate capitalism, huh? Don't conservatives make up like a pretty big plurality of the people in the country? None of these people make any sort of conservative content that gets anywhere. Don't you think that's really interesting how in this incredibly meritocratic, perfectly functioning capitalist wonderland that Ben Shapiro knows America truly is, that no conservatives have been able to put through any hard-hitting or sticking media outlets that consistently push out conservative narratives about the world? What happened to capitalism, my duder? What happened to get woke, go broke? Aren't all these people supposed to be broke by now? I don't know. I really wish I was as broke as Disney was when they went woke by having a multi-billion-dollar company. Man, if I was broke in the same way Disney was broke, I feel like I'd be doing pretty fine. But that's just me. I don't know. Maybe Ben Shapiro thinks broke is something else. Maybe they're morally bankrupt.
The vast majority of conservatives actually want to watch the same kind of stuff everybody else wants to watch. They just don't want to be insulted in the process. Well, we are going to be dedicated to making that kind of
Man, can you imagine being insulted by Football Man No Stand-Up?
We can't win the culture war if we're not competing for the people we are attempting to reach. It's not going to help to make a conservative more conservative. We need to make moderates more conservative. We need to take liberals and we need to allow them to see a conservative point of view through a medium that is going to attract them and isn't going to repel them.
So herein lies Benny Boy's entire plan, to basically make conservative propaganda masquerading as entertainment to try to weasel his way into the entertainment industry. He is doing the exact thing he's criticizing leftists of doing by saying racial inequality exists and economic inequality is bad. The difference is these people make art and then they have morals to the story. This is why everything he's going to make is so terrible, because they start off with the ideology. They start off with traditional family values. Oh yeah, gun culture. Ooh, what about good old-fashioned American imperialism? They are going to take all of these ideas and then kind of cake paper mache entertainment on top of it to try to couch it and serve it up to people, when in all actuality it's just they're disgusting, same old repackaged propaganda. Also, I've moved away from the idea that economic inequality is one of the main drivers of the problem of radicalization. It's probably up there as well, but you being just primed to believe some of these sorts of conspiracies, I think it has a lot to do with your upbringing and the culture that you come up with and whether or not you're just conservative in general. Lots of these conservatives have just fallen off a cliff, and many of them are not poor whatsoever. Lynn Wood, Sidney Powell, Roger Stone, lots of these people have more money than most working class Americans. Absolutely not are these people anywhere near poor, and they've fallen harder than most people that I know. They are completely bought in. It's not a joke. It's not a meme. Some of these people are actually facing real jail time. Just white knuckle ride the Trump train as it falls off a cliff because they're so bought into the conspiracy. They'll do it any point in time in the the day, they'll face any lawsuit. Right now, Sidney Powell is looking down the barrel of a $1.9 billion lawsuit from Dominion Voting Systems after parading around that lie, trying to make them look like they're owned by the ghost of Hugo Chavez and the CCP, and their entire business model is a fraud and a sham as they try to steal votes for Hillary Clinton while they bathe in like Hillary Clinton secretary girl bathwater. They'll do anything, and they're not poor. It's time to bust the myth. Trump voters were not working class. The Atlantic said the billionaire developer is building on a blue-collar foundation. On November 9th, the New York Times front page article about Trump's victory categorized it as a decisive demonstration of the power of overlooked coalition of mostly blue-collar white working-class voters. But here's just one problem. This account is wrong. Trump voters were not mostly working class. During the primaries, Trump supporters were mostly affluent people. This misrepresentation of Trump's working class support began in the primaries. We can skip over a little bit. But what were those anecdotes and accurate representation of the emerging Trump coalition? There were good reasons to be skeptical. Moreover, according to what is arguably the next best measure of class, household income, Trump supporters didn't look overwhelmingly working class during the primaries. To the contrary, many polls show that Trump supporters were mostly affluent Republicans. For example, in March 2016, NBC survey that we analyzed showed that only a third of Trump supporters had a household income at or below the national median of about $50,000. Another third made $50,000 to $100,000, and another third made $100,000 or more. And that was even true when we limited our analysis to only non-Hispanic whites. So there you go. Ben Shapiro's little grift that he's decided to get into, his new little pastime. Same with Tim Pool, trying to do their best to be hip and cool and get into the entertainment industry, and Zoomer culture to try to win over, pick up those little people that they can radicalize towards their grand plan of trickle-down economics or some dumb shit like that. I don't even know, but I'm glad that we could at least see it out, and I hope that we had fun while doing it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys a little bit later when the next video comes out, but until then, peace.